Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I just saw a big scientific review that came across my social media, and actually it came from Alan Aragon, and I want to talk to you guys about it. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And this is important to talk about because we've had fitness YouTubers come through and say their scientific studies show that ketogenic diets help with cancer. Now this is something I was always open to when we started seeing this data come out. Right, you guys remember that I said, okay, there are studies suggesting this. We need to look into it further, but that's interesting. Hey, that's great. We need to look into that. Just like I've said the same thing with intermittent fasting, and the data is inconclusive on intermittent fasting, but there's interesting data out there, and we need to look further into it. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say anytime we see changes in diet, when there's scientific data to suggest that changes in our diet can impact different diseases just as effectively as drugs can, we absolutely need to look into that data. Because truth be told, it's much preferable for overall health and well-being of people if we can adjust our diets to avoid diseases rather than have to use medication and drugs to do those things. I mean, that's always the better choice. So if we have that option, we should absolutely study it. It needs to be explored. And the thing that we had with ketogenic diets is, like I said, okay, the idea behind it was that many types of cancers, many types of tumors have a very high amount of insulin sensitivity. And most people understand that. They suck up insulin. That means they suck up blood sugar, glucose, as a fuel source. Now, what we do know is that weight training seems to be the most effective method for regulating that. Meaning people who lift weights, gain a bit of muscle, who weight train regularly, actually have better insulin sensitivity in their muscle tissue and everything else in their body. And that tends to give the body the ability to fight tumors better because the tumors get a little less food. That's a good thing. So resistance training, exercise in general, but in specific, resistance training helps with that. Now, the idea behind ketogenic diets is that these diets lower circulating insulin, but here's the thing a lot of people aren't aware of. Relatively lean people who resistance train and do cardio have less circulating insulin than people on ketogenic diets. Now, that throws a lot of people off, like, no, but they're eating carbs. It doesn't matter, guys. They have enough insulin sensitivity that they can actually oftentimes even handle their carbohydrates, fairly high carb diets, with less total circulating insulin than some people on ketogenic diets. So just so you understand that there are other factors at play. But it was interesting because the idea was that less circulating insulin, in theory, less tumor growth. The only problems with that is that a lot of it comes down to how lean you are, because obesity is a factor. Well, the problem is that higher fat diets tend to have higher obesity, and most people who follow ketogenic diets, you'd be surprised. This is a statistic. They're not necessarily leaner than the general population. And they're certainly not leaner than people who follow healthier diets in the ketogenic diet. So you've got that confounding factor that has to be factored in. And then we have to look at the isocaloric, because when a ketogenic diet is kept at a lower calorie, isocaloric meaning less calories than you take in. Sorry, isocaloric would be maintenance calories. So again, you're not overeating. So we had a study looking at that, and that's what we need to understand, or not just a study, but a whole systematic review. Because the other factor that we had, and this is why this review is interesting, what did we note recently? Last year it was found out. They found that many types of tumors can feed on ketones, not just glucose, in which case the ketogenic diet's not helpful. And in fact, if you were bulking and using the exogenous ketones, which is a supplement now, in theory, you could make your tumor grow much, much faster, because you've got the two fuel sources of these tumors, ketones and glucose with insulin. Again, interesting. But the fact that we have tumors that can grow off ketones also kind of makes this a problem. It means that the whole circulating insulin theory may not be that useful. So we had this study look at it, and this systematic review looked into it and said, okay, we've looked at all the data, and we found that there's no conclusive evidence to suggest, and what that means, guys, let me put that into layman's terms. It means they didn't find anything useful, meaning it doesn't seem to work. Now, they said we need to do further study on this, but at this time, there doesn't appear to be enough evidence to suggest that ketogenic diets help with any type of cancer, enough that we would recommend them as part of the cancer treatment. In other words, there's no evidence they actually help. Now, furthermore, they explain that ketogenic diets can have side effects. They can have other health problems, and every expert who works with them knows this. It's only these yahoos on the internet, people like dumbasses like Brandon Carter. I mean, he is a dumbass. Listen to him speak. He's pretty stupid. Mike Rashid, who's also kind of stupid. Again, if you listen to these guys speak, it should be very clear that they're not functioning at a high level intellectually. They really aren't. They're kind of dumb. But they're saying it, and then authors like Gary Taubes, people who are making a six-figure income writing books about ketogenic diets, these people will be like, I'll do it. But anyone who actually uses them clinically advocates that you don't do them outside of the care of a medical doctor and a registered dietitian, because they can have problems. They're not actually necessarily safe diets for everyone to follow. There can be problems with them. So you confound the fact that these are diets that can have side effects, negative side effects. And anyone who's done ketogenic diets who claims, oh, they never had any side effects, you're the exception, not the norm. You're the exception, not the norm. They have side effects with no evidence to suggest that they actually help. When they study it and look at it, there's been different things that suggested, okay, it's worth looking into further. There may be benefits. But when you look at it closer and you look at the sum total of studies and data, and you sort through all of it, the overall data doesn't appear to show that. Because what people need to remember, because we do different studies, because you have a study that says, hey, 70% of people seem to improve slightly on this form of diet, but you only had 10 people, and then you go compare it to another study where you had 50 people, and then you start finding some people got worse and some people got better in that study. Then you have another study with no change. Then it starts to become apparent why you don't take that single study and say, well, these people seem to improve. Could have been random. There could have been other factors. So when they've looked at the total sum of the studies, there doesn't appear to be a statistical improvement with any form of cancer. Meaning when they get enough people to look at to where they can analyze the data and say, we have 100 people on this diet here, 100 people not on the diet over here, did we see an improvement? When they get bigger numbers, they don't find a statistical improvement, meaning the average of this 100 people on this didn't do better. Or 1,000 versus 1,000, there wasn't an improvement when you compared the two groups. And that's the sort of stuff they start looking at when they do these different studies. And so the total data suggests there isn't a benefit. And again, we've got yahoos on YouTube and YouTube Fitness who are running around saying, well, these diets help with tumors. They can help with cancer. And then we have the scientific community coming forward and saying, no, it doesn't appear to be the case. We're looking at it closer now that we've got more than just a couple studies, and we look at the sum total data of the studies, and it doesn't seem to help. Nice try. It was worth looking into. Maybe we'll get some other data later that'll show it. We'll keep our mind open to it. But at this time, it doesn't appear to be the case. Which basically means, in short, it doesn't help. It doesn't work. And it also means if you're going to rely upon that, you're probably being a little bit foolish at that point. And I understand that people who have medical issues are willing to try anything oftentimes. But in this case, when it doesn't seem to help and it has other side effects and health effects, it may not be worth doing. Especially if you're going to get unnecessary side effects and problems to deal with when you're already dealing with cancer. So again, we've got a case of the YouTube community running and jumping on stuff, and a bunch of people who are trying to market things, sell books, sell ebooks, things like that, jumping on the bandwagon with stuff like this. And then the scientific community is saying, well, now that we're getting multiple studies to look at, it doesn't seem to help. So the question I would ask you, who are you going to believe? The medical community and the dietitians community who researches it, where these people originally got the idea that it might help, or the people who got the idea that it might help from the scientists who further looked into it and then said, no, it doesn't seem to work. I'm going to go with the scientists on this one rather than some guys on YouTube who may not have looked at the total data and may not be aware of that. But here's the problem. You got these guys now who are now selling this. They're marketing it. They're financially invested in the diet. Do you think they're going to repeat what the scientists are saying now? Of course not. It's not in their financial best interest. And that's the problem with getting too financially invested into an unproven hypothesis. Problem is that now that it seems to be an unproven hypothesis, there's still going to be people 5 and 10 years from now still selling it as a possible cure for cancer. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.